Sunday, April 21st, 2019, and there have been churches burned and desecrated and bombed all over the world from Europe to Asia today. Hundreds and hundreds are dead. And only in the Sri Lanka case, because it's 400 times bigger than the Christchurch massacre, are you getting and seeing any reportage on this. Bombs detonating inside churches, inside hotels, splattering people all over the walls, blowing their arms and their legs off. Viewer discretion advised. If you're a TV viewer, remember we are a radio show, also simulcast on television on many TV stations across the country and at Infowars.com/show. But remember what I said over and over again when they were having calls to prayer, not just here, but all over the world after the tragic New Zealand attack that killed 49 people. And we were hearing that Christianity and white people are inherently evil and the greatest terrorists, and that Islam is peaceful. And I'm like, thousands of churches blown up a year, hundreds blown up a year in the Middle East, firebombed 800 plus, bombed or burned down in France, and there's almost no coverage of it. And I said, you watch. You come Palm Sunday, right through Easter, there's going to be bombings and shootings and killings all over the world. And there were. But almost no coverage of it except for Sri Lanka because it was so spectacular. But just your run-of-the-mill, couple people shot, stabbed, church burned down. No coverage of that. I mean, we can show you hours of footage of crosses being torn down in Egypt and churches being blown up. This is what goes on. But, oh, it gets worse. Al Jazeera, BBC, and others are saying that if you report the name of the alleged Sri Lanka suicide bomber, let's show folks a document cam shot of this evil-looking dude, that you're being Islamophobic because Islam did not do this. That's right. Islam is the religion of peace. Media downplay Sri Lanka Islamic bombing that killed 400% more people than Christchurch. Infowars.com. Get it out. See it for yourself. It's also on newswars.com. Easier to spread that. It's not censored as much. A river of blood. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says several Americans killed in Sri Lanka Easter bombing massacre. 5 Brits among 207 killed in Sri Lanka church and luxury hotel bomb attacks. Here's some of the last pictures tweeted out before these sweet families were blown limb from limb. How dare those evil Christians in peace, 7% of the population, live and breathe. They'll be pushed out of their areas soon enough. Bloody Sunday, Sri Lanka Easter church. Oh, and remember, police, 875 churches have been burned or blown up or desecrated in 2018 alone, just last year in France. Oh, but don't investigate Notre Dame, even though the architect that rebuilt it 10 years ago said, old oak doesn't burn like that. It's almost impossible to light. The carbon's all out of it. Anybody that knows about firewood knows that's true. If an oak tree's been down more than 5 years, it won't even burn. But people don't seem to understand that. And there's a lot of witnesses that said some bizarre behavior was happening inside the church. But who knows, maybe it's leftist. They caught a leftist philosophy professor with cans of gas inside St. Patrick's. Remember that? But that got almost no coverage. Had the lighters, had the gasoline sloshing out. And, of course, they have now charged him with planning to turn St. Patty's Cathedral into a Roman candle. You can also pull up maps online, again, of the religious makeup of Sri Lanka, one of the most religious nations in the world. And you can see, again, the last census, Muslims were approaching 10%, Christians approaching 7%. And you can notice that the Christians live right up against the Muslims and will now be pushed out by the sword, following the edict of Allah. That is in the Quran. Everything inside the House of Islam is the House of Islam. No one will be tolerated. Outside the House of Islam is the house of war, the house of the sword, the house of submission or death. What do you think about that, my friends? We're going to open the phones up a little bit later to get your take specifically on all of this because it's critical. But I want to get Sri Lanka suicide bomber. We're going to play some video and audio of him saying this here in a moment, even though it's in some other foreign gibberish. Anyone who disagrees with Muslims should be killed. Extremist statement went unnoticed. So he's over in Sri Lanka. Turns out he went to a buffet, had a big dinner, and reportedly launched all this. And he's saying, anyone who disagrees with Muslims should be killed. Well, hell, in London, they have the Muslims out at the speaker's corner with signs saying that. They allow Muslims to set up harems and sex trade with small children that they kidnap because it's their religion. Federal judge ruled last year, no, it was this year, that Muslims are allowed to cut their daughters' genitals off. Their clitorises. Thank God Islam didn't know about science, or I guess they'd go after the G-spot. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, God put that there for a reason, not for these guys to cut it off, and not here in America. But that's how insane all of this has gotten. And I'm not going to sit here and put up with this crap anymore. I mean, look at this bozo the clown, inbred mental patient person. There is a Muslim guy that's a good guy that criticized it. It's Imam Muhammad Tawahidi. I want to get him on. He was the guy that warned that Muslims were going to run people over with trucks in New York, and were saying it at a mosque particularly. When Paul Watson wrote about it the day after the guy ran over everybody in New York, it was the #1 story on Twitter, and they had congressional hearings about it with Twitter and said, Paul Watson put out fake news that a Muslim attacked New York and yelled Allah Akbar, and that there was a imam that warned of it, Imam Muhammad Tawahidi. And the Twitter individual said, yes, we took it down at lunch. You're right, it's fake. He yelled Allah Akbar. This imam did warn. There are some Muslims that warn about it. But then he got banned. Paul's tweet got deleted. Because you can't tell people that people are running you over with cars and trucks screaming Allah Akbar. Because you'd wake up, because you'd do something. Here, let's play some of this guy just days ago over in Sri Lanka saying, we're going to kill everybody. Here it is.
அல்லது முஸ்லிம்களுடன் ஒப்பந்தம் செய்த மனிதனாக இருப்பான் அல்லது கொல்லப்பட வேண்டிய மனிதனாக இருப்பான் மார்க்க பார்வை இப்படித்தான் மார்க்கம் பிரிக்கும்.
Let's hit pause again. By the way, this fellow, if you're a radio listener, he has an image of a blood-splattered wall behind him. And remember, he's a Al-Qaeda sympathizer. He's a Sunni. And he says, we're going to kill you. And we're going to blow you up. We're going to murder you. And we're coming. And you're going to pay. Because we're going to follow the Quran. And when they do, Al Jazeera and BBC say, this is not Islam. None of this has happened. Now, that for like 1,400 years have been invading the whole planet. And only when they pushed into Germany and Germania and almost overran Poland and Hungary and Romania, and there were hundreds of thousands killed, did finally, after hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and over 100 invasions, and most of Spain was taken. Only then did England and the Norse and others in France, because the Vikings had taken France over, said, we better go do something about this, boys. And they went in there and pushed them all the way out of Eastern Europe, all the way out of Serbia, all the way back to the Middle East. Now, never got Constantinople back. It's called, you know what it's called, right? The capital of Turkey. It used to be called Constantinople. It's called Istanbul. And they have tour guides that teach you, look at the great Islamic architecture. It's all Christian churches that they tore the crosses off and put their moons up on. So there's groups saying, we're coming to get you. It'd be like if aliens arrive from deep space in flying saucers and broadcast, we are going to conquer your planet and kill all of you. And everybody, oh, we're going to submit to you then. Gosh, I better be part of that. Thank you. Thank you. Not fighting back. The cuck dimension. The chicken you-know-what dimension. I am not in the cuck dimension, and I'm not putting up with it. And if Muslims want to have a reformation and get out of this and stop all this, that's great. But I'm not going to sit here on Easter and put up with this garbage. When we come back, Greg Reese's report is. But the first thing I wanted to finish up with this hour is this Greg Reese report that is a real action item and that I hope you'll share with everybody you know, because it's very, very, very important. Jihad in America and the history of Islam. Greg Reese, here it is.
Islam is an ideology based on the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith. While it is taught that the Quran is the literal word of God as taught by the Prophet Muhammad, we know that it was written after Muhammad died. It was assembled and officially released during the first 3 caliphates by a priest class of Islamic warlords. Curiously, several of the symbols chosen to represent Islam were prominent symbols in the Roman Catholic Church, such as the Babylonian symbol for Baal, the all-seeing eye, the seal of Melchizedek, and the Virgin Mother. A good Muslim is expected to accept the Quran and the Hadith as the Word of God, and to emulate Muhammad as the perfect man. And as you study these books to learn how Muhammad lived his life, you will learn that the great prophet was a slave owner, a spousal abuser, a pedophile, and a polygamist. The Quran will teach you to fight and enslave all non-believers, and to never be friends with Jews or Christians. The Quran will teach you that going to war against Jews and Christians is virtuous, and that war is deceit. According to Islam, lying to non-believers is a virtue. Lying is such a virtue in Islam that there are 4 different varieties taught. Taqiyya, for example, is a lie to advance the cause of Islam by gaining the trust of non-believers. When Muhammad died, the Islamic priest class made it their priority to subjugate all Muslims, to murder, rape, and enslave the non-believers, and establish severe Islamic law in every land on earth. Over the next 1,400 years, millions of Christians and Jews were taken as slaves. Judeo-Christian societies were destroyed and replaced with Islam. When Rome finally retaliated, they ultimately failed to take back the Holy Lands. The Crusades were brief and mild compared to the Islamic caliphates, and yet, most Americans hear all about the Crusades, but nothing about the Islamic caliphates. Those who understand Islam can clearly see that jihad has come to America. In a 2011 poll, 24% of Muslims believe that military attacks against civilian non-believers is justified. Moderate Muslims claim the Quran is misunderstood and that inspiring jihad is not its purpose. But the difference between a religion that accidentally inspires mass murder and one that deliberately inspires mass murder is meaningless. Islam will never stop. And eventually, the need to defend our American way of life will outweigh the fear of being called racist. The question is, will it be too late? For newswars.com, this is Greg Reese.
Greg Reese, ladies and gentlemen, is really kicking ass, and that is such a true report. And you can argue, well, Islam's had some golden ages and some leaders that were more altruistic, and that's been true. But when people go back to the original seminal Orthodox work, it's expansionist. And it expanded in the jihad to take over the West and got pushed back during the Crusades. And then under the Ottoman Empire, it expanded again all over the world. And then it, again, bet the farm in World War I, lost that. And so Islam is the dominant force on the planet right now. Most Christians have fallen away. Leftists are allied with Islam. We don't have a lot of hope unless we're honest with ourselves about this. And that's what this comes down to.